himself.
And I thank my great nephew here for bringing you. And I welcome you to this beautiful Riverside Cemetery, which I was instrumental in acquiring for the city of Moline. And my son Charles was instrumental in hiring the architect who designed this cemetery from where this curved road is behind you on to the top of the hill and the terraces down. From there on has been added after that. But this was designed on a French concept, and you will not find a straight road here. It's designed on circular roads. But let me tell you a little bit how I ended up in Moline. About myself, I was born in Vermont. My parents had emigrated from England and came through Canada and ended up in Vermont. Well, when I was 4 years old, I was the second youngest of 5 children. My father heard about an inheritance back in England of a cousin who died. And he wanted to go back and claim that because money was scarce. So he made arrangements, got on a boat to go back to England. His luggage arrived, but no one ever heard from him again. And whatever happened to him, no one knew. Now there's my mother who has to raise these children. She sewed for people, did that kind of thing. But I was apprenticed as a young man at the age of 17 to a well-known welder in the area who was very skilled at the blacksmithing trade. And I apprenticed with him for 4 years, after which I was ready to set out on my own and start my own family. I married a young lady I'd been very enamored with for a number of years, whom you will meet later, and was very excited about getting started. Well, folks, that was a rough 10 years that followed. One thing, there were too many blacksmiths in Vermont, and it was hard to make a living, and a lot of them who were established. I worked for some people, but finally I wanted to start on my own, so I borrowed some money and set up my own shop, and it burned down. Well, that was one thing that happened in a blacksmith shop. You put fire underneath a wood frame building, you're likely to have fires occasionally. But I borrowed some more money. I borrowed the amount, a large amount at the time of $75, and rebuilt, and I burned down again. Well, I had been picked up and taken to jail because I couldn't pay my debts. I'd been bailed out, I think, by my in-laws, and I decided it was time to leave town because they were going to put me back in jail unless I came up with the money. So I took off for the West because I'd heard from a friend of mine that a place called Grand Detour, Illinois needed blacksmiths. They certainly didn't need them in Vermont. So I went out there, and it took me only about 6 months to get there at that time with the travel it was. But when I got there, I lucked out because the man who literally owned the city of Grand Detour and everything around it owned several mills. And he had one mill that had quit functioning because the shaft had broken and no one knew how to repair it. He asked if I could do that. I said, I can do that. And I did, and my reputation was established. And I did very successfully. I'd made arrangements with my family. As soon as I was successful, I would send for them. And so I built a house, and I built a shop very quickly. And within the year, I sent for my family to come join me. But one thing that I found out that one of the farmers were complaining most about was plows. Now, there were a number of plow makers in this part of the country. A lot of people think I was the only one who made plows. No, there was plow making in Princeton, plow making in Kewanee, plow making in Galesburg, plow making in Grand Detour. But they didn't like the plows. They brought plows from the east and they didn't work in this soil very well. They'd have to stop every few feet and scrape it off to get the plows to work because it wouldn't pull through this muck and rich loam that was out here. Well, I kind of looked at that, and I looked at what some of the other plow makers were doing. One plow maker started to use a little steel, put a little steel strip on there, and I thought, well, that's pretty good because the smooth surface will shake off the soil better than the hard iron surfaces or the wood ones that they were using. And so I experimented. Well, it has so happened that the guy who I fixed the mill for had a broken saw blade there made out of steel. So I took that saw blade, cut off the teeth, put it on the end of the plow with the iron in the back of it, and made the mold board slick as I could by polishing it. And well, I didn't know if work. I set it out in front of my shop, kept working. One day a farmer came by and says, what's that contraption out there? And I explained it to him. He says, you care if I take that home and experiment with it? I said, well, be my guest. And he did. He came back raving about it, had a few suggestions that I incorporated. Well, pretty soon everybody in the area wanted one of those plows. I had to quit making other blacksmithing jobs and just start making plows. But it soon became very clear to me that Grand Detour was not the place to have success in taking plows, because I was getting, people wanting it from quite a distance away and always west. So I said, I got to move west and I got to get where there's better transportation. And I experimented with several places along the Mississippi, but I found the ideal location, a place called Moline, Illinois, which was meant City of Mills. And so I found they had water power there, which was very important. This water power plant had been built and it was working fine. They had coal there in a place called Coal Valley, where they were mining coal. They had transportation up the river, and a railroad was about to come there. There had been a railroad planned for Grand Detour, but they changed their mind and moved it south. And that's why I had to leave there. Now, the problem was I had all that, plus the wood, which was very important for the plows. Steel. Where do you get steel? The United States didn't make good steel. I had to ship it in from England, which made it very costly. But I kept my eyes open. When the first steel from Pittsburgh was run off the press, I was the man who bought it. And I started using American steel. Well, that was very good, but we struggled for 10 years to make a go of it here. There were other plow companies around, you understand, as I said, and we were in competition. The only way I could figure is make a better plow than anybody else. So let's make it clear right now, I did not invent the steel plow. I did not invent the first plow. I invented the best plow.
There you go.
I manufactured, and I always was working to do that. A lot of my partners said, just make the plow and sell as many as you can. That's the way we make money. I said, no, I will always work to improve that plow. I will not sell an inferior product. And that was the Deere philosophy from the get-go, that we would always make the best product that we could make and sell it at the best price we could. Well, we didn't have much success until my son Charles joined the company. And Charles had sent him to school to get an education. He ended up getting a finalist degree from a business school in Chicago. Came back, and I literally in a short time turned the business over to him. He understood marketing. He understood how to sell things. He understood how to set up a system out there. And so that worked out very well. And in the last few years, I essentially didn't do much with Deere. I kept the title of president of John Deere all my life, but for the last 20 years, I didn't really do much. My son ran the business. But I was very busy in civic activities, and I've often been called one of the founders of Moline. When Moline became a incorporated city, they had to have a mayor and a council. And I ran for mayor the first time and was defeated. But it was only a 7-month term because they were getting into a cycle, so the next term was going to be a full 2-year term, and I was overwhelmingly elected at that time. Boy, what a bad job that was. Because you know what the big issue was at the time? Alcohol. And the churches and the women were against alcohol being sold in the city. But you have to remember, most of my workers I had imported by that time from Sweden, Belgium, and Germany. And as one of my Belgian foremen told me, he says, you have to understand, John, beer to them is like water to you. You take away their beer, you're going to have a riot on your hands. And so I was kind of waffling between the two. Didn't want to make anybody mad, but eventually I said, I'll put it up to a vote of the people of the city, get off the hot seat. And it barely passed, but I was able to issue licenses. But after my first term, I didn't want to run again. That was the end of that. Along with some other partners, I proceeded to start the First National Bank of Moline with 2 other gentlemen. I brought the first fire truck to Moline. I was the person who, as mayor, covered the open sewers in downtown Moline, made them underground. I put some sidewalks down there so people didn't have to walk on the mud streets in Moline. And so I felt pretty good about the things that I accomplished in my 2 short years while I was there. But I had a lot of farms also, and I was very interested in farms. I spent time there. And after my first wife died, my second wife and I spent a lot of time in California and other places, but they'll tell you more about that when you meet them. But I would like to thank you for coming today to meet the people who, some of them relatives of mine, some of them workers I worked with, and some of them owners that I partnered with to create things. My name is John Deere, and I was born in 1804, and I died in 1886.
Thank
Yes,
you.
you may.